The last thing I remember clearly, and I mean really clearly, before everything changed, was the sound of that ocean. Not the way the ocean sounds when you're sitting on a beach watching the waves. No, this was something else entirely. This was a roar, a wall of black water, and I was right in the middle of it, being thrown around like I weighed nothing at all. And then, just like that, it went quiet. Everything went quiet. And that's when I knew something was very, very different about what was happening to me. I want to tell you about that night. I want to tell you because I've carried it inside me for a long time now. And there are things from that experience that I think people need to hear. Not because I'm special or because my story is unique, but because what I saw and what I felt out there in that water changed every single thing about the way I understand this life. And I mean every single thing. I grew up in central New York, small towns, cold winters, the kind of upbringing that doesn't leave you with a whole lot of softness. My mother was a single mom back when that wasn't really something people talked about openly, and she did what she thought she had to do. She'd move me from one family to another, pay them a few dollars a week to take care of me, to put food on the table for me, and send me to school. I think she believed she was doing right by me. I really do. But when you're a kid, you feel things. You feel whether you belong somewhere or not. And I never belonged. Not in any of those houses. I was always the extra one. The one they didn't really invite in. The one they just tolerated because of the arrangement. And a child carries that. A child carries that for a very long time. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned how to depend on myself and nobody else. That was the lesson life had given me, and I had taken it to heart completely. I didn't need people. I didn't need affection or closeness or any of that. I was going to cut my own path through the world, and I didn't particularly care who got in the way. I'm not proud of that now, but I'm being honest with you, because this story only makes sense if you understand who I was before it happened. I went into the Navy because I couldn't afford college on my own. Ended up training as a mechanical engineer, and I was good at it. More than good. I had a direction, and I followed it without wavering. And eventually I got out of the service and went into commercial diving. Something about being underwater had always called to me, ever since I first put on a tank as a young man and slipped below the surface. There's a silence down there, a kind of calm that I never really found anywhere else. So I combined the engineering with the diving and built a career doing exactly that. Eventually, I became chief engineer on a research vessel, the kind of job where every day was different and every problem was new, and my mind was always moving. That was my dream. I had built exactly the life I set out to build. What most people don't know about commercial diving back in those days, we're talking early 1980s here, is how genuinely dangerous it was. You could not get personal life insurance, not as a commercial diver. The companies wouldn't write those policies because the survival rates weren't good enough to make them worth it. I knew men who lost their hearing, men who came up too fast and got embolized, men who just didn't come back. But I never let that touch me too deeply. That was the kind of man I was. Death was a taboo subject in that world, and we all just agreed, without ever saying it out loud, to pretend it wasn't sitting right there at the edge of everything we did. In 1983, we were working off the California coast, evaluating a new piece of equipment, a remote operated submersible. It was a kind of job I liked. Technical, interesting, out on the open water. But late in the day, the sky started doing things I didn't like the look of. A storm was moving in fast, and the decision was made to put a small boat in the water and send a crew into shore before things got any worse. The boat was a rubber Zodiac, the kind we use for retrieving equipment in heavy seas. We had confidence in it. We had confidence in ourselves. That's a dangerous combination sometimes. I was asked to go because I knew the harbor well. Normally, the chief engineer doesn't ride the small boats. That's not part of the job. But the captain figured my familiarity with the entrance would be useful. We went down to the equipment locker that evening and pulled out the life vests. And these things had been stored so long they were absolutely encrusted with dirt and debris. We had to beat them against the wall just to shake some of it loose before we could put them on. Big orange pillows strapped around our chests. We piled into the Zodiac and started heading in. The storm was moving faster than any of us had expected. We had a navigation device with us, and we could see the lights of the shore ahead. But the rollers were enormous, 25, 30 feet. We'd crest a wave and try to get a visual on the harbor buoy, then drop down the backside and wait to rise up on the next one and look again. Before long, we had lost track of the buoy entirely. The storm had pushed us south of the harbor, a mile off course, and we didn't know it yet. We thought we were still on track. We thought we were almost in. And then we hit the breaker zone. These were not small waves. These were enormous walls of water, and we drove right off the edge of one, just straight off the face of it. And the next one came down on top of us before we could do anything. It folded that Zodiac in half like a piece of paper, and I was thrown, just launched out into the ocean, into the dark. There were no lights, there was nothing. Complete darkness, complete chaos. The noise was extraordinary. You can't imagine the sound of an ocean in a storm until you're actually inside it, being thrown and spun and pulled in every direction at once. I'm a trained diver. I know how to handle myself in the water. I kept telling myself that. But I had completely lost all sense of which direction was up. I couldn't find the surface. I was being tumbled like a rag doll in a washing machine, and I had no control, none at all, over anything that was happening to my body. You can only hold your breath so long. After a while, when you've been in the water long enough without air, your body starts to feel something almost like peace. That's oxygen deprivation doing that to you. I knew it from my training. I knew exactly what that sensation was. But knowing what it is doesn't make you immune to it. You start to feel this warmth, this strange euphoria, and you stop fighting as hard as you should. And then your body does what bodies do when they need air. You breathe. You breathe in ocean water, and that's it. That's the end of fighting. I drowned. I want to say that plainly. I drowned in the Pacific Ocean that night. I was in my mid-20s, and I drowned. And then the noise stopped. I don't know how else to describe it except to say that one moment I was in the middle of the most violent physical experience of my life, and the next moment everything was still. Not just quiet, still. The tumbling was gone. The cold was gone. The fear was gone. There was just this tremendous, absolute peace, and with it this feeling that I was not alone, that there was something there with me in that darkness, something vast and gentle and present in a way I had never experienced another presence before in my life. I remember thinking, because I was still thinking, still conscious, still me. I remember thinking, well, this is strange, because I had just come from the most brutal few minutes I had ever lived through, and now there was this, and I was curious. That sounds odd, I know, but I was genuinely curious about where I was and what was happening. Then I noticed a light, just a small point of it at first, the way a star looks when you see it from very far away. Just a pinprick. But it pulled my attention completely, and as I focused on it, it seemed to grow, or I seemed to be moving toward it, or both. As I got closer, I started to understand that it wasn't a single light at all. It was made of countless fragments, millions of them, maybe more than millions, all moving in relation to one another the way a school of fish moves in unison, like they shared one mind. Each one was its own point of light, and yet they were all part of the same thing, all communicating, all alive in some way I didn't have words for. I looked down at myself, and I realized that what I thought of as my body was becoming one of those fragments too. I was part of it. And that's when I felt it, love. Not the kind of love I had known in my life. I want to be careful here because I don't want this to sound like something out of a greeting card, because it was nothing like that. This was something structural, something fundamental. Like love wasn't a feeling being directed at me, but was the actual material that everything was made of. The air itself, if there was air. The light itself. All of it was built out of this substance that I can only call love. And it was unconditional in a way I had never even conceived of before. No conditions, no expectations, no taking it back. Just love, everywhere, in everything, without end. And then 3 of those fragments of light came toward me. They broke away from the rest and they came to me, and I knew them. I knew them the way you know your own name. Not from this life, I want to be honest about that, because they weren't people I had known growing up or worked with or anything like that. They were something older than that. A family that had always been with me in some way I had just never been able to perceive while I was alive and walking around. My soul family, I've come to call them. Before long, there were a dozen of them around me, welcoming me, and I felt more at home than I had ever felt in my entire 70-something years on this earth. More at home than I ever felt in any of those houses where I was placed as a child. more at home than I felt anywhere. This was home. This was where I belonged. We went deeper into the light together, into a space that felt enormous and rounded and complete. And then something began that I can only describe as a life review, though that phrase doesn't really do it justice. It wasn't just watching my life go by like a film. I was inside it, reliving it. And not just from my own perspective. I experienced it from the perspectives of everyone I had ever interacted with. Every moment I had ever shared with another person, I got to feel what that person felt because of me. Every time I had been careless with someone, or dismissive, or just plain unkind. And there were plenty of those times, I won't pretend otherwise. I felt exactly what that had done to them. Not as a punishment, no one was punishing me, but as an understanding, as a complete and total seeing of the truth of how we affect each other without realizing it. I have to tell you, there were parts of that review that were not easy to sit with. I was not always a good man. I was selfish and hard, and I ran right through people when they got between me and where I was going. And my soul family was right there beside me the whole time, experiencing it all with me. I felt ashamed, not because anyone was judging me, because they weren't. They were just loving me right through all of it. But because I could see the gap between who I had been and what was possible. And it humbled me in a way that nothing in my ordinary life ever had. After the life review came something I didn't understand at the time. A kind of corridor or pathway stretching out ahead of me, with other possibilities shimmering in the periphery, other directions available. It was less clear than the review had been, more diffuse, but I understand now that I was looking at what was still ahead of me, what was still mine to live. And then the light, and when I say the light, I mean all of it, the entire enormous infinite presence that everything was made of. It spoke, and it said, "This is not your time. You must return." I said no. I want you to understand how serious I was about that. I looked at my body. I could perceive it somewhere out there, back in that dark water. And it looked like nothing I wanted to go back to. Cold and broken and small. And I had this family, this love, this home. I had no desire whatsoever to leave it. So I argued. I actually argued with what I understood to be God. I made my case. And the response came back one more time, steady and certain. You must return. You have a purpose. That word, purpose. It didn't land in my ears the way a word usually does. It went all the way through me. And with this expansive consciousness that I had out there, this total awareness that is so much greater than anything we carry around in these bodies, I understood exactly what that purpose was. It was simple. It was clear. And with that understanding came an acceptance that I couldn't argue against anymore. You just know when something is the truth that deep. I found myself outside my body, watching it. 3 of my soul family members were with me, and together we watched that body tumbling in the water below. There was some wreckage from the Zodiac floating nearby, and the bow line had wrapped itself around one arm and was moving it, almost like it was waving. I watched a wave hit the wreckage, and the remaining air in one of the pontoons made it buck and rise. And when it did, the line cinched tight and pulled that arm up, and I watched my own shoulder dislocate from the force of it. I wasn't in any pain. I was just watching. And then my family gave me a gentle push forward, and I came back. Coming back was harder than dying. That's the truth of it. And I've said it many times since because I think people need to know. Dying was peaceful. Coming back was like being forced into a box that's too small for you. Your whole self compressed and cramped into this heavy physical thing. And the world comes rushing back in. The salt water in your lungs, the cold, the noise, the pain. I was coughing and choking and trying to get my bearings, and I could hear my crewmates in the water calling out for me. They'd stayed out there searching the whole time. Real heroes, every one of them. One of them had held onto a flashlight and was sweeping the surface looking for any sign of me. I tried to call back, but my throat was raw and my voice wouldn't cooperate. Eventually they spotted me and we all pulled together around what was left of that Zodiac, and we started the long swim into shore. When we finally hit the beach, one of the guys set his feet on either side of me and yanked my shoulder back into the socket. I pounded my thumb until it went back into place on its own. I felt like I'd been run over by something enormous. Later, when some of the crew were asking me how I'd been under so long, what had happened, I made a joke of it. Neptune spit me back, I told them. I laughed it off. Because in that world, in that culture, you didn't talk about death. Death was the thing that happened to other people. And if you acknowledged it too directly, you were admitting something nobody wanted to admit. So I buried it. I took the whole experience and I packed it away as deep as I could get it, wrapped it up tight, told myself I wasn't going to look at it. That's not entirely true. I held on to two things from it in those early years. One was the life review, the seeing of myself clearly, the understanding that I had work to do, that I could be better, that I could become someone who actually deserved the love that had been shown to me out there. I could hold on to that. The other thing I held on to was the love itself, and that was harder. Because once you felt love like that, ordinary life starts to feel like a pale copy of something. You go looking for it everywhere. You want it back. And the wanting can become its own kind of suffering if you're not careful. Many people who've had experiences like mine come back and fall into a deep depression for that exact reason. Not because anything is wrong with them, but because they've touched something so much more real than ordinary life. And the gap is hard to sit with. I found my way through it, slowly. Built a life, kept working, kept trying to be better than I had been. And then, years later, I was working as a manager of dialysis programs at a hospital in Syracuse. And I started noticing things going wrong with my back. numbness in my arm that I chalked up to carpal tunnel. Little things I explained away. And then one day in the office, it was like my entire back exploded in pain. I walked into a meeting and told them I needed to go to the emergency department. While I was lying in the exam room waiting, a nurse came in with tears in her eyes, and I felt it, that déjà vu, but not like any déjà vu I'd felt before. Like something clicking into place that had been waiting to click. I knew that moment. I had seen it. In my life review, in that light, I had seen exactly this room and exactly that nurse and exactly what was coming next. Stage 4 lung and bone cancer. It had started in the lungs and spread to my spine, eaten through bones in my thoracic region, collapsed the spine itself. Lesions in my hip, my brain, my kidneys. The doctor gave me 6 to 8 weeks and told me to get my affairs in order. I said no. Not out of denial, but because I had seen this too. I had seen the cancer in that light, yes, but I had also seen myself living past it. I had seen there was more ahead, more purpose still to fulfill. So I said no, and I got to work. I put together a healthcare team. I combined traditional medicine with holistic approaches. I leaned hard into gratitude, real gratitude, the kind that doesn't exclude the hard things, that is grateful for the suffering too, because the suffering is part of the whole. And within 6 months, I was cancer-free. I am in my 80s now. I have had decades to think about what happened to me in that ocean, and I still find new layers in it. What I come back to most often is this. We are so much more than what we can perceive of ourselves in these bodies. We are vast. We are loved in ways we can barely imagine. And the work we do here, the love we show each other in even the smallest moments, it matters in ways that extend far beyond what any of us can see from where we're standing. I'm not afraid of dying. I haven't been afraid of it since that night in 1983. What I care about is living this life as fully and as honestly and as kindly as I possibly can. Because I know now what it looks like from the other side. I know how much every single interaction we have ripples outward into the world. I know how much we matter to each other, whether we realize it or not. And I know that there is a love at the root of everything, at the absolute core of existence, that none of us is ever truly separated from, even when it feels like we are. I long to stay out there in that light. Part of me has never completely stopped longing for it. But I understand now why I came back, and I am grateful. Grateful for the hard parts and the easy parts. For the years I wasted being someone I didn't want to be, and the years I spent becoming someone better. For the cancer and the recovery and the ordinary mornings and everything in between. It's all part of the same thing. All of it built from the same stuff. All of it, in the end, love.